just to get you up to speed on these Finsa boards, in case you've missed it. Now, there's been a bit of a sensation on Instagram since we started talking about the Finsa Fibropan Hydrofugo. Lots of people have moved over to using this instead of Medite because it gets a really exceptional finish with water-based paints. It has a lot less grain raising than any other MDF I've used before. So trying that really switched me on to Finsa, and then I found out about their other interesting products. And now we've got a job where the customer wanted to try one of these textured boards. So this is the range of textured boards. They come only in black or natural brown core. The cement one comes in this colour, which I think is its own unique colour. So that's just a cement-like texture. The board we're using is the Negro EZ TEX Trama. Now, the first thing I noticed about this board is it is not as good quality as the Fibropan Hydrofugo. It isn't quite so dense, and if you see the back of it, it's got a sort of ripple to it. So it's not as flat from the factory as that high quality MR MDF board. The way the board looks straight from the factory on the black unfinished edge, that black unfinished face I should say, is like this. And as I say, a little bit of a surprise that it isn't a denser, higher quality board, given that these boards will set you back in the region of £200 for a full sheet. I've got these all cut out. I did it on the rail saw. I had wanted to cut the sort of double width boards to the perfect kind of outer size and shape using the panel saw, but I'm having a lot of trouble getting it perfectly tuned up to cut parallel. So I'm having someone come to look at that because it's just not something I've done before and I want to get it right. So back to the rail saw. I'm using the roughly 3mm kerf of the rail saw blade as the door gap, so I've designed around that. However, as a result of the table saw problems and diving in a little bit too quick, this central pair is a little bit undersized. Ended up having to take too much off to get it back to square and parallel. So I thought I'd lay this all out with the gaps, take a measurement of the whole length with the gaps, which was 3016, and then I'm just doing a comparison to my original drawing of the same length, how that ends up. And oops, what have I done there? I've disappeared. But what I was finding was that length was meant to be 3020, so I'm 4mm undersize, which just means that I'm going to have to undersize the frames that receive the doors behind here. So I'm going to go back to the workshop, and these frames, these sort of face frames that we've already part assembled, I think all I will do is take that 4mm off this middle frame here, because I know it's the door pair that bridges this which has the issue, and that'll be fine. I think just reducing that by the 4mm, and then everything will come in then, and I think all the hinges should kind of land where they should. Now we have a convention where we number the doors with little drilled holes. It's a 4mm drill, just going in a few mil to make sure it won't disappear when it's sanded and painted. So on that bottom edge, which you won't ever see, you can always identify which door goes where, because by keeping them hung together in their pairs, we'll be sure that the gap perfectly matches. Some of these boards got a bit of rain on them when they first came in, and that has been enough to just swell the fibres in that patch, and that's quite tricky to deal with. We could sand it smooth first and then spray it, or we could put a coat on and then sand that back, but either way it can be quite hard to perfectly even that back out to the rest of the surface. So, oh, you just finished? I wanted to get you doing it. Oh, well. This is just one coat on the back. This is denibbed with 240 grit. You can see the texture, which is just a characteristic of this board. It's not very flat on the back. Just seeing here where those rainwater spots were, they have raised, as you'd expect really. This is just one coat. They'll get knocked back now. Hopefully they'll disappear. After the second coat, the finish you get on the back is like that, which we're going to accept. And on the front, with no further denibbing, it's like that. And again, we think that's acceptable for this pattern. We'd normally be looking for a flatter finish on MDF if it was just flat. We feel this is okay. So that's just 2 coats of top coat. That's all the paint we plan to put on. Next process is to sand that with the Mirka Deros orbital sander with 240 grit, taking care just to float nice and flat over the top and just knock back those high points. Once that's done, assuming there's no errors with that, then it'll be a coat of the AF72 10% sheen clear coat. Again, water-based Sayerlack product from Movac, and that's what we've done on this test piece, which had a lighter grey, by the way. This is just a different grey paint on the test piece, and that's the finish you get then with the black parts coated. And we feel that one top coat is going to be sufficient. We're just going to be taking care not to rub through on the sanding like we did on the test piece there. So we're trying these new kind of low profile leveling feet because the design we've got in mind wants to have a very low plinth. It's just going to have an LED strip hiding tucked underneath there. So Brady's started to break through the texture with the orbital sander at 240 grit, and he's got to the point where he's wary of going on any more with that sander because it does slightly bridge down into the bigger flat points, so then we're clearing that paint thickness there. This is back to black. It just looks a bit grayer because it's dusty. It'll come up blacker with the clear finish on it. The tricky thing is this texture, it has some high points and some low points, so the thinner lines are usually a bit lower, and there are places like that where he really just needs to manually now go in with the hand sanding block. So he's doing that with this one, which has a little bit of quite firm foam on the backing there. Again, 240 grit just seems to be the best balance of not too aggressive, but still clearing some material. And so he is having to quite manually just rub the corner of that into these spots here. So it is a very laborious process, and this is 40 minutes work already just on the sanding to get to this stage. So we've got, how much do you think beyond this? I think it could be another 40 minutes.
Impossible.
And that's just one door out of 6. This is me loaded up for the first day of install. Doors are still in progress. We've got walnut effect melamine for the carcasses. That's the slim plinth there with the low profile feet, and our box of bits including lighting. Got the drawings with me. Got the domino, because I'm going to domino together a shelving unit that goes inside, which we didn't get onto doing in the workshop yet. Brady's getting some more sandpaper ready to do the last doors. So these 3 still need full sanding. And we've got 3 that he got as far as putting the clear lacquer coat on, which just needs a little bit of a denib because it's not as smooth as we'd like it to be. Now we are noticing there's more of a patchy look to these. I think it's the interplay of this darker grey with the clear top coat. It just seems to be showing a little bit darker where his denibbing has gone flatter. But at this stage, with the amount of work involved, it's the best we can do, because I think to completely eradicate that, it would be a case of very meticulous sanding into all those edges, which is not going to happen. It's fine though. I mean, with there being a pattern on it, you could say it's just all part of the texture. Brought my drawings. I've also brought my laptop just to make things a bit easier to check the details. So if I look at a section drawing of that, that's how it all wants to end up, and it's quite critical that I set things out correctly here so that everything else lands as it should. What we're aiming for is that plinth that you can just see at the bottom there. That's going to have a 60mm setback from these boards. So the 60mm overhang here, which I've worked out, should ensure that the sight line from the furthest corner of the room doesn't allow you to see the light source, which will be an LED strip here, because you just want to see the glow, not the harsh light. A thorough check at this stage saves a lot of time later, so I've stuck my laser level, the Huapar cheap thing that people often ask me about, not a bad level. I've stuck that on, I've lined it up with the front edge there, and I've used my tape measure to take a measurement from the front edge to where that hits the ceiling, and I'm double checking that that is in the region of what the drawing says it should be. Now the downside of using any sort of levelled sub base that gets covered over is that once the weight goes on, things can change a little bit. So I like to be sure that that is pulled down to the floor, which I do by fitting a bracket a mil or two off the floor, and then when that one tightens down, I'm sure that it's pulling down, and then whatever that's adjusted to, the weight won't drop it down further. These base panels want to end up overhanging at 60mm. I've positioned it parallel at 78. So that means that if I take 18mm off the back, scribed against the skirting, then it will sit tight into place with a 60mm overhang. So this is a swankyscribe, Tri-scribe. You find them on Instagram. And that, I have to do it with my other hand, but that gives you a flat 18mm spacing and a point for going into profiles if you need to, both at 18mm away from the point of the pencil. Now I'm using this profile, which we use for most of these kind of jobs. It's called the draw profile. There's the code I'm looking for. From Hafele Luke's 12-volt system. And I'm using it with these clips. So we always get the 2043 strip line. I've only just noticed that this is actually the 2062. So for some reason we've been sent that in error, but it has the same wattage per meter, 4.8 watts per meter, and it's still warm white at 3000 K. I've just cut and loose fitted these top pieces. I scribed them to the back like I showed with the shelf. I decided not to angle the back of them. And as you can see, it's not a perfect scribe on top. But from your sight line, even quite close to it at eye level, you don't see it there. The doors are all on and I'm doing the final adjustments. I spent some time already tweaking the gaps. Scribes next, and the tip-on mechanisms for the doors, because these are unsprung hinges. Blum 110 degree overlay unsprung hinges. So they will have a little tip-on piston that will pop them open. The last adjustment I've got to do is just this door. It needs to twist, just twist a touch that way, and that one needs to go a touch down. So the twisting on this one will happen by turning this screw tighter, so that will go in, and the bottom one the other way out, and just sort of halfway adjustment as appropriate on each of them. This one will drop down by me just loosening and then tweaking down these mounting plates. So these Blum tip-on mechanisms, these are the extra long ones. They're the variants that you should use when a door is above 1300 millimeters, then you should use the long ones. You can mount them in a holder that's mounted with the same drilling position as a mounting plate, so you could use the same jig. I decided to keep things just looking a bit cleaner and drill them into the edge. It's a 10 millimeter drill, and what I've done is I've then just popped it out, lined it up to the door, and just done a little mark around that. And then in the centre of that mark, I've done a sort of relief hole using I think it's a 4 millimeter drill bit, just because when you then drive in your screw that comes from Blum and is made to centre flat on that special washer, when you drive that in, it raises a rim of MDF, and I find I get the best result by clearing a bigger hole just a couple of millimeters deep, and then that should sit nice and flat. I've got that scribe fixed and some space plugs to secure everything more rigidly to the wall. I'm just going to finalise the lighting. Now the switch, touch switch that we normally use is that one, which is this code. But we're now going to try something we haven't tried before, which is an invisible one, still touch activated, but that can be mounted through less than or equal to 30 millimeters of board. It says it's a capacitive switch. That's the code for it. You could recess it in a 35 millimeter hole, but since it says up to 30 millimeters of material is fine, I'm thinking I'll just fit it in there behind this, about mid-height, give it a try and just see if just touching it there will turn the lights on. And it works. Now there are quite a lot of subtleties to the design, which took a great deal of thought and a great deal of care in the manufacture and fitting. We wanted it to look floating, this is the customer's request, and for it just to look sort of like a feature wall. The slight zigzag in the door gaps helps to disguise the door gaps, they just blend in with the other black lines. And we decided not to have any kind of cornice, but just to make the texture of the boards a statement in itself. We've got Blum hardware, sort of open frame inside, and these touch to open mechanisms.